a glimpse of the divinity. And there, upon an altar, you behold a snake, or a crocodile, or a cat, or some other beast, a fitter inhabitant of a cavern or a bog than of a temple, or a giant penis, the phallus of Osiris, which Isis had substituted upon the altar of Egypt. The priests of Egypt were always impostors, but once so celebrated, had degenerated into a race of jugglers, a circus, if you will. Also, the Chaldeans lived upon the fame of their fathers and upon their own base trickeries. No one was honest anymore. No one could point to God. No one understood that all the symbols of the universe and in nature represented the power of an unseen God that the first men worshipped. The Brahmins or Brahmins, whose priests of India once so virtuous and celebrated as being so wise, they too had fallen. Once they had forbidden the shedding of so much as an insect's blood. One day in the year alone, at the feast of Jagam, they were authorized to sacrifice the flesh of a beast, and from this many had refrained from attending, unable to conquer their feelings of abhorrence. But now, they had learnt from the fierce Scythians and from the Phoenicians who traded on their coast to sacrifice the wife upon her husband's pair to appease the gentle Brahma with the blood of men, and that ceremony continues to this day. The angels who had presided over them became savage demons who scourged them on to cruel penances, even to lifetimes of suffering and famine. And in the sacred groves where once the Brahmin fathers had taught their precepts of love, men emaciated, careworn, even dying, wandered sadly, waiting for death as tortured prisoners wait for their liberty. But worse still, these wicked priests sought through the land for the most beautiful young women and trained them to dance in the temples and to entice the devotees to their arms with lustful attitudes and languishing looks, and with their voices which mingled harmoniously with the golden bells suspended on their feet. They became prostitutes for the priesthood. They sang hymns to the gods in public and in private, enriched the treasuries of the pagoda with their infamous earnings. And thus a pure, very simple religion was debased by the avarice and lewdness of its priests, till the temples became a den of thieves. So prostitution sat enthroned upon the altars of the gods, and today it continues, although prostitution in a different way. Most religious meetings today are spiritual consumerism. It begins with the problem, and when the hour is over, the problem has been solved, and the coffers of the priest, the minister, have been filled in the process. Greece and Rome, buried in sloth and luxury, did not escape the general contamination. The emblem of generation, the phallus which Isis had bestowed upon the Egyptians, and which they had held in abstract reverence, had now obtained a prominent place in the festivals of these nations, as did the lingam and those of the Hindus, and it was openly paraded in possessions before guests in the home, in processions in the streets. It was worn by Roman nations in bracelets upon their arms. It adorns our nation's capital as the Washington Monument and stands mocking us in Dealey Plaza in Dallas, Texas. The sacred festivals and mysteries which they had received from the Egyptians and for which the women had been wont to prepare themselves by continence and the men by fasting, were now mere vehicles for all the depravities and deceptions of the very lowest kind. Men were permitted to join the women in their worship of Bacchus or Adonis, of the Bona Dea, and even of Priapus. And so dissolute did the Dionysia become, ladies and gentlemen, that the civil powers were compelled, yea, forced to interfere with those of religion, and the Bacchanalia were abolished by a decree of the Roman Senate. But it was too late, for Rome's fate had been sealed. And the Jews, the chosen people of God, had not their religion changed? Had not God, weary with their sins, yielded them to captivity, scourged them with sorrow, menaced them with curses? And isn't the state of Israel more a secular state than a religious state today, despite the claims of Zionism? They worshipped Baal, Peor, the Priapus of Assyria. They sacrificed their children to Moloch. They had dancing girls in the holy temple. This corruption spared no race, no people, no religion, and no one can point to any other and say truthfully that they are more guilty than they. For all are guilty. All people, all religions, all nations, all over this world have destroyed the simple precepts of all of the different religions of the world. And none resemble even slightly what they began to be. And I'm not going to go deeper into particulars that are so degrading to human nature. I can see you squirming in your seats as it is. So I will have mercy. I will instead invite you to follow me by steadily listening to the hour of the time to a corner where you may begin to more readily understand where we are at and where we are going, for there are many who have traveled this route before in the history of the world. It is enacted in cycles, and those who ignore history are doomed to repeat it. There is a place in the world where, at least for many ages, religion was preserved in its pristine purity, and whose priests, through a barbarous soldiery, were received as martyrs, they claim, in heaven before they'd even learned to be knaves upon this earth. It was an isolated spot unknown to the world in the earlier ages of vice. It is now a kingdom renowned for its once great power that encircled the globe, and for its luxuries from hemisphere to hemisphere, and for its civilizing influence, and also its abject cruelty. It was encircled by the blue waters of the German and Atlantic seas and abounded in the choicest gifts of nature. It was called the White Island, from the cliffs which still frown so coldly upon Gaul and the land of green